Welcome. This is problem number 1 from homework number 9. And in this homework, we're looking at references and objects and how to visualize those and follow changes in the objects that take place via the references. So here I just suggest having a scratch piece of paper and drawing out what's happening in memory as the program progresses. So the very first line here creates a reference variable late, and then also creates a bus object, which is every time you say new, you're creating a brand new object. In this case, it's an object based on this description of the bus class down here. So we have a new bus object that pops into memory, and the description indicates there's just a single integer in there called passengers, which will default to 0. And this assignment operator takes the reference to this new bus object and places it into the reference variable. So after the first instruction, you have those two things in memory, and then the second statement declares an early bus reference and also instantiates a new bus object with passengers set to 0. Then the next instruction says take the late reference, which is this guy here, dot over or dereference it to go over to the object, find the passengers variable, place a 3 in there. Next instruction also goes to the late reference, dereferences it, and puts an 8 in the passengers variable. And then the next couple of instructions go over to the early object, the object referenced by the early reference variable, places a 9 in the passenger variable, then overwrites that with a 10. And in the end it says let's print out what's in late.passengers, which is the 8, and early.passengers, which is the 10. So the output here would be 8 and 10. So scroll down and make sure that's one of our choices here. Let's take a look at the next question, which is question number 2. And follow the code and visualize what's happening there. So there's a couple of different variations of how you can manipulate either the objects that are being referenced, the values in those referenced objects, or manipulate the reference variables themselves. So this one starts off in a similar way. We have late pointing to an object. We have early pointing to an object, and then late.passengers gets a 2, late.passengers then also gets a 4, and this assignment statement takes whatever value is in late.passengers. So late.passengers right now is a 4, and then the location that it's assigning into is early.passengers. So here's early, and then dot passengers is here, and we're going to copy that 4 into that location. Now that we've made the copy of the value 4, we are going to go back and go over to the early passengers variable. So there's early dot passengers, and increment that from a 4 to a 5. Since these are two separate copies of the value 4, one's in this object and one's in this early object, incrementing the early object only takes effect on that early object's value, not on the one it was copied from. So in the end, when we print out early or late and early, again the output's going to give us 4 for late and 5 for early. Then this next one creates 3 objects. So draw those up here. And this problem, just more practice in moving values between the objects via their references. So b1.passengers, there's b1.passenger here, gets a 1. b2.passenger gets a 2. b3.passenger gets a 3. It says take what's in b1.passengers, which is this 1 here, and add 10 to that to give us 11. Assign that back into B1.passengers. B3.passengers, which is this 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. We're going to assign that into the B2.passengers variable. So B2.passenger gets a 6. Then we print those out. So the output will be 11, 6, and 3. Now this next problem has kind of a different twist on what you're manipulating. So in this one we start off in a similar way to a couple of the earlier problems. So in this one we're going to say Metro.passengers gets a 3, City.passengers gets a 17, and this is the unique feature of this one compared to the earlier problems. Whereas the earlier ones were saying take the reference dot over to an element inside the object. This assignment statement is manipulating the references themselves. So here it's saying take whatever is in the Metro reference variable, which is this reference to this object, and take that reference and put it into the city object. Now behind the scenes what's really happening is that every entity in memory has an address where it is in memory. And this object, let's say it's at address 1000. That's the value that would be in Metro. And then this object's at some other address, say 2500. So when this object says when this reference says it's referencing this object, he knows the address or where to find that object at address 1000 or 2500 in this case. So if we say take what's in Metro, it says take whatever address is stored there, say 1000, and place it into the city reference variable. And so now this one says I also am keeping track of whatever objects at 1000. So he's no longer pointing to this spot in memory, but he's keeping track of the object that's over here. So now we have two references pointing to the exact same object. So if I say let's take the city reference, dereference it here, and go over to the passengers variable, there's city here, and dereference it, go over to the passenger variable, and place a 40 in there. Then I go to the Metro reference variable, this one, and dereference that and go to its passenger variable. It's in fact the same variable here. So when I put the 55 in there, it's overwriting the 40 we simply just put in there, the instruction before. So when I come out and say, well, let's print what we see at these two reference variables, city.passengers is going to see this 55, and metro.passengers also is going to see that same value 55. And this problem's kind of similar to the previous one, but let's take a look and walk through it. So in this one, we create the two references, each pointing to an object. Passenger variables start at 0. Metro.passengers gets a 10. City.passengers gets a 20. Take whatever address is in Metro, this address here, whatever that happens to be, and place that address into city. So it's going to point to the same spot. And then increment what Metro is pointing to. So Metro is going to increment this from 10 to 11. Then print what they both see. And again, they're both going to see, city.passengers is going to see the 11. Metro.passengers is going to see the same value 11. Let's take a look at question number 6. This is similar to the previous questions, although in this case we're using objects of type bank instead of objects of type bus. And so let's see what gets created here. Create a couple of bank objects with references big and little. And each of these objects has as its instance variable a variable called dollars that defaults as 0. So after we create both objects here, we go to big.dollars. So there's big, dereference it, go to the dollars field, put 1,000 in there. Little.dollars equals 200. And then we have an assignment operator, so we're going to take a value and assign it to a location. The location is going to be big.dollars, so this value is going to change over here, and we're going to take whatever's in little.dollars, which right now is 200, add 1,000 to that. That'll give us 1,200. And we're going to assign that into this location. So big.dollars is going to go to 1,200. Then we say let's go to little.dollars and assign it little.dollars as 0. Has no effect on this value since they're two separate variables. And then for output, we're going to see what's in big.dollars, which is 1,200, and the 0 from little.dollars. And just a couple of more of these. Let's cruise through these questions. So we start off with 0 in big.dollars. Assign it to a 90, or assign a 90 to it. Add 10 into that to give us 100. Divide that amount by 2 to give us 50. And then increment it by 1 to give us 51. Then print that value to the screen. For number 8, we have created the two objects with references to them. Big.dollars gets 22. Little.dollars gets 11. Here we're saying we're going to take the assignment operator and move the value from little.dollars, that's 11, and move that into the location big.dollars into this location here. So the 11 is going to overwrite that 22. Increment the value in big.dollars, decrement the value in little.dollars, and then print out big and little. Give us 12 and 10. In contrast with the problem before, this assignment operator is going to be manipulating the reference variables and not the objects or the values inside the objects that are being referenced. So let's take a look at that. Big and little there. Big.dollars gets 22. Little.dollars gets 11. Take the referenced, whatever value is in little. So let's say we have these at addresses 3,000 and 4,000. And we're going to take the 4,000 that is in little and assign it into big. So this 4,000 here is going to overwrite the value that's in there. So now big is going to point to the same thing that little is pointing to. And we have two references pointing to this object, and no one's pointing to this object up here. So if we go to big.dollars and increment it, this goes from 11 to 12. But if we go to little.dollars and decrement it, it goes from 12 back down to 11. And the values reported here for big and little will be the same, since they're referencing the same variable or the same object. So that's all the questions from homework number 9. And if you keep a good solid visualization on a scrap piece of paper as you work through these problems, that should make the solution of each problem quite a bit simpler.